This is Dave, and I'm here with Ethan, and together we are Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, episode 92-inch.
On this week's episode, we air part one of our interview with legendary guitarist Richard Bennett, known for decades of touring and recording with Neil Diamond and Mark Knopfler, plus his early work with Weird Al Yankovic.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
It's a podcast about Weird Al.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Seriously, the whole podcast is about Weird Al.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
You don't have to listen, but we're glad you are.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
This just in, Punxsutawney Phil says 6 more weeks of winter.
Well, I think we should have Groundhog Stomping Day and get rid of this cold weather because I am freezing.
I am buried under like 2 feet of snow here.
Well, Dave, get out of there. We got to record this podcast.
It's okay. I have Frank outside. He's shoveling for me. He's doing a pretty decent job.
Oh, good. Frank, when you're done, I could use a back rub. So that intern, Frank. We had a fun episode last week with episode 92-inch, our guest Monique Donnelly, and she left a really great comment on one of our Facebook posts after the episode aired. She said, "I have spent an embarrassing amount of time listening to the last 10 seconds of every episode. You guys are hilarious."
Well, thank you, Monique. We think you'll enjoy the rest of the episodes, too.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if she really wants you to just listen to the last 10 seconds, I'm not going to stop her, but yeah, I think she might find some other content she enjoys.
I know our intern Frank puts a lot of effort into those last 10 seconds of the episode, so I guess if you're only going to listen to 10 seconds of every episode, those are the 10 to listen to.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you, Monique. It's always great to hear from you.
Absolutely. And we do want to send a congratulations to our friend and supporter, Mike Minnick. He won the Patreon contest for the free t-shirt by being the first person to correctly guess that this week's guest would be Richard Bopcat Bennett. And Mike, finally, listening the second it drops has paid off for you, man.
We'll be doing more Patreon contests in the future that do not necessarily involve listening the second the episode drops. So if you want to get in on the fun, be sure to head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/2000inch and sign up to support the podcast and get the opportunity to win some great prizes.
We also want to send a congratulations to our friend J.W. Halford and Joe Kappa for the official release of Ghost Dogs at the Sundance Film Festival. And today is the last day to catch it at Sundance, so be sure to do that if you have not already.
And be sure to head on over to ghostdogs.net for more information about the film and to pick up some really cool merchandise.
As we mentioned on last week's episode, February 1st, on Monday, it was the 40th anniversary of the release of the Another One Rides the Bus EP, aka the Placebo EP.
We asked our listeners to post pictures of them with their EP over on our Facebook group at group.2000inch.com, and wow, did you all deliver. Great pictures on the group.
Yes, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, head on over to group.2000inch.com and check out those pictures and all the other fun that we have in the Facebook group.
Yeah, thanks everyone for posting your pictures. They were really cool. It was a lot of fun to look at them all.
Now, we realize that not all of our listeners are total nut jobs like Dave and I, who have forked over the dough to collect a Placebo EP, but I'm sure you folks want to hear all about the Placebo EP that we always talk about and is beloved by so many Weird Al fans.
In case you do not have the EP or the internet, there are 4 songs on this EP. The first song is Another One Rides the Bus. There's also a version of Happy Birthday, a version of Gotta Boogie, and a version of Mr. Frump in the Iron Lung.
Now, most of these songs ended up being re-recorded for Al's debut album, Weird Al Yankovic, with one exception.
The version of Another One Rides the Bus that appears on the Placebo EP is the same version that originally aired on the Dr. Demento show on September 14th, 1980, and was later released as a single. This same version also later appears on the first album. This version is the only version that has ever been released.
Now, while Another One Rides the Bus was recorded once and never again, that is not the case for Happy Birthday. The Placebo EP's version of Happy Birthday was again re-released on the permanent record Al in the Box box set, and was also remixed into a new stereo version for the Hurricane Katrina charity album Laughter is a Powerful Weapon Volume 2 back in 2005.
Of course, the song was also re-recorded for the Weird Al Yankovic album. A yet fourth version of Happy Birthday was recorded for the movie How to Be a Latin Lover. While only an excerpt is played in the film, you can hear the full version in the deleted scenes on the DVD. This version was also released on the Squeeze Box, the Complete Works of Weird Al Yankovic exclusive album Medium Rarities in 2017.
The third track from the Placebo EP, Gotta Boogie, was eventually re-released to members of the Demento Society, Dr. Demento's fan club, via his album Dr. Demento's Basement Tapes 13 in 2005. That one is a tough one to track down, but it's technically available.
And there has never been a commercial re-release of the Placebo version of Mr. Frump in the Iron Lung. So if you don't have the Placebo EP and you don't want to go to jail like Tommy Chong, you will need to request it on the Dr. Demento Show streaming service available on drdemento.com.
From all of us here at Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, congratulations and happy 40th anniversary to everyone involved in the release of the Placebo EP.
We especially want to give a shout out to some of our amazing past guests who have worked on the album, including Frank from the Bank Sanchez, who played bass on Happy Birthday.
Beefalo Bill Burke, who not only designed the cover, but contributed miscellaneous insanities on Another One Rides the Bus.
And John Schwartz, now he's not credited as Bermuda on the sleeve, he of course played accordion case on Another One Rides the Bus and drums and backing vocals on Happy Birthday.
And then the great Dr. Demento, who's credited just as BEH. He, as we know, recorded Another One Rides the Bus as it aired live on his radio show, and he lent backing vocals to Happy Birthday.
And this week's guest, Richard Bennett, credited as Bopcat Bennett on the EP. He played guitar on Happy Birthday.
And we are so excited to make a very special announcement about another player on the Placebo EP coming up this spring. On episode 100-inch on March 31st, 2021, we will be premiering our interview with Joel Miller, a.k.a. Jammin' Joel Miller, who plays bongos on Gotta Boogie.
Wait, the Joel Miller? Weird Al's best friend from college, Joel Miller? The best man at Weird Al's wedding, Joel Miller? Interviewed on Weird Al's Behind the Music special, Joel Miller? Featured in Sam Anderson's incredible New York Times Magazine article about Weird Al, Joel Miller?
Yep, episode 100-inch, Joel Miller.
Wow, what a score. Intern Frank, get in here, buddy. That is such a great score for the podcast.
Frank, you've come through for us once again.
Each week you continue to get all these amazing guests for us. I just gotta know, Frank, how did you ever track down the Joel Miller?
Oh, Frank, this seems to happen every time you're about to talk lately.
Well, sorry, Frank. We don't pay you enough to put up with this each week.
But we don't pay Frank.
Exactly.
Anyway, you know what that sound means. We've got a message on the 347 Spatula Hotline. The 347 Spatula Hotline, the official hotline of Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, is sponsored by Angel Valenzuela and David Cash, two amazing Weird Al fans and podcast supporters.
Let's listen to the message now.
Hi, Dave and Ethan. This is Eric Rhodes calling from hundreds of miles away from Park City, Utah, where I was able to stream the premiere of Edgar Wright's documentary, The Sparks Brothers, where Al was interviewed along with other Sparks fans like Mike Myers, Patton Oswalt, Fred Armisen, Jason Schwartzman, and Scott Aukerman. And Al does make the final cut. He pops up 3 or 4 times throughout the movie, offering commentary and at one point playing accordion, which you see in the trailer. Unfortunately, the song that Al performed with them live on stage was not used, although in the Q&A, the band expressed interest in releasing that show as its own concert film in some way, hopefully maybe on the Blu-ray. And of course, being an Edgar Wright film, it's going to have plenty of supplemental material on the Blu-ray in the future, so I'm very excited to see what ends up there. And unfortunately, Al's Sparks pastiche, Virus Alert, does not come up at all in the movie, but again, hopefully on the Blu-ray somewhere.
Wow, Eric, thank you for all of that amazing information. I cannot wait to see this documentary.
Hopefully more Weird Al content shows up on the Blu-ray. All right, let's move on to This Week in Weird Al related news.
The 2-time Grammy Award-nominated Jim Kimo West has announced that he has a fun, upbeat, slack-key cover of Paul Simon's classic tune, Feelin' Groovy, coming out on Friday, February 12th.
Last week, our listener and supporter, Jackson Scoggins, called in 8 years from the future and referred to Jim as 2-time Grammy Award nominated. We wanted to clarify that Jackson was very careful to use the present-day title for Jim as not to spoil the results of the upcoming Grammys, Oscars, Tonys, and Emmys for the next 8 years. Thanks a lot, Jackson.
We got some really exciting news regarding episode 9-inch guest Susan McNabb.
Susan recently released her memoir, The Opposite of Famous, a Hollywood memoir. It's available on Kindle and paperback. And as a treat, we have with us right here in the studio, Susan McNabb herself. Welcome, Susan. How are you doing?
Hi, thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. You were on way back on 9-inch. I can't believe that you're still in touch. You finally wrote this book. It's finally out. What can you tell us about this book?
Well, it's my story of my life when I lived in Hollywood. I lived there for 27 years, and I worked as a model and an actress in commercials. I worked for Elvira for 17 years. I did tons of other crappy jobs. I was an extra in film and television, and I worked as a makeup artist and an assistant director. You know, I was a single girl, and I just pretty much did any job anybody would offer me. So consequently, I have lots of great behind-the-scenes stories and lots of funny stories. Oh, I also dated Jerry Seinfeld for 8 years, and so
Right.
I was in that. So that was kind of funny. So yeah, I wrote a book. It's like a collection of funny essays about the different aspects of my life there.
Wow. Well, so for people who are having trouble remembering all the way back to 9-inch, Susan, the reason we had you on was not because, you know, you worked with Elvira, you dated Jerry Seinfeld, you were in all these TV shows and music videos. We had you on because you play a Robert Palmer girl, you know, a girl with, you know, legs and stockings and a mustache in the UHF music video.
That's right.
So that was probably only the tiniest little blip on your career, which sounds like you've just had an incredible career.
Well, thank you. It was not a tiny blip. I assure you, it was a very fabulous, fun, wonderful blip. So don't downplay my blips, okay? Because they were all very important to me, and I loved that job. I have to tell you, it was, well, I did tell you on the episode 9-inch, but it was a fun day and just a great memory now, of course. And I love looking at the video because I'm so young. And yeah.
Yeah, it was so much fun getting to relive it, and I definitely urge people to go check out 9-inch to hear all about that. But one thing that I don't think we really covered too much, and maybe you cover this in your new memoir, but the character Elaine on Seinfeld was actually partially based on you? Yes,
it was initially. Of course, she became her own self and, you know, went off in 1,000 other directions and was nothing like me. But in the very beginning, when they decided to write the Elaine character, her name was actually Susan in the beginning.
Oh, wow.
And when she was, yeah. Oh, wow. And Jerry, well, at least that's what Jerry told me. But he said he would get frustrated because he would come up with lines, and he'd say, "No, Susan wouldn't really say that." And they're like, "Jerry, it's not really Susan." And so they changed the name to Elaine. And of course, she took off and was created into this beautiful, wonderful, funny, charming character. And I'm sure it was eventually based on lots of other people that had nothing to do with me. But in the very beginning, the tiny little seed that was first planted was based on me. Yes. So I'm told.
Cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, it is.
Were you ever watching Seinfeld and like, hey, I said that, or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yes, as you know, writers write what they know.
Right.
And I was in his life for a long time. So, yeah, I recognize a lot of little elements of a lot of episodes, which is fine. It was his life, too,
Yeah.
So. Absolutely. And it was fabulous, of course. The show is wonderful.
So you dated Jerry Seinfeld for 8 years, and you talk about that a lot in the book, I'm sure. But one thing that really caught my attention is a little teaser. You said that you were a butt double. Now, I mean, what the heck is a butt double, and how did that happen?
That's right. I can say, not very many people can, but I can say that I was Gina Davis's butt double in a movie called Speechless. Hey, it was a glamorous job, okay? Yes, I often hand doubled and foot doubled and leg doubled, and I was a photo double for a lot of different actresses. It's one of those weird little jobs that a lot of girls in Hollywood do for money, and they're all union jobs, so everybody can stop giggling because they're very professional. But yes, I portrayed her booty in the book, and the chapter is called "A Room with a View of My Booty." So there you go.
Can you give us a little more insight on what exactly it takes to be a booty double? Is it just like they didn't think her booty looked bootylicious enough, or how does that work?
It takes tremendous talent, I have to tell you. No, it was just that I happened to be there. I was her hand double on 3 different films. And it doesn't mean that her hands aren't perfect because they were gorgeous, but it's easier and quicker to use doubles for all the little insert shots,
Okay.
Like if she's turning the page of a book, you don't need to bring her in to turn the page for the close up. So they use a hand double. And because I was hand doubling her, they asked me if I would, photo double her, which means any body part. And I said, sure. And then I got onto the set, and it was my butt that they needed. Of course, I was clothed. I had on clothing. She was wearing a mini skirt. So, she was dressed, but it was a makeout scene in the car with her and Michael Keaton. So I had to climb on top of Michael Keaton's photo double and move my butt around in a professional manner. It was really quite a job, and of course makes a great story now. So.
Yes. Wow. So when you watch the film, you can be like, there's my butt.
Yes. In fact, I have never seen that film. That's one thing that's so funny about, I mentioned that in this book several times. When you do this, 4 or 5 days a week, after a while, you're just like, yeah, whatever. And a lot of the things I've never even watched, and I've never watched that scene. So maybe I should look for it on Netflix or something before I start talking about it. It might be more embarrassing. It might be more embarrassing than I thought.
I want to print out a screenshot and have you sign your butt.
Well, it would be my pleasure.
Well, we are so thrilled to get to have you back on the show. The Opposite of Famous, a Hollywood memoir, just came out. You can get it on paperback. You can get it on Kindle over at Amazon.com. And, is this the one and done memoir, or is there more stories that you have held back for another sequel?
I think I should keep going because, as you pointed out, I haven't talked about Weird Al in this book. And so, as you know, I have some stories there. So I think there might be another one in me. We'll see.
Wow, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Then I could come back.
Yes. We'd love to have you anytime. Thank you so much for joining us, Susan.
Thank you.
Susan wanted to make sure that we let you know that her dog and past podcast guest, Joey, was doing great as well.
It's always great to hear updates from our past podcast guests, regardless of how many legs they have. Susan, I'm so excited to read Opposite of Famous, and I hope all of our listeners run right out to Amazon and pick up their copies today.
Last weekend was the premiere of Festpocalypse, the digital benefit for San Francisco Sketch Fest. As Weird Al put on his Twitter, he was one of 20,000 comedians to be part of the show. Ethan, as the resident comedian of Dave and Ethan's 2000 Inch Weird Al podcast, what can you tell us about the show?
Now, Festpocalypse was awesome. I had so much fun. It was like 3 hours long. There were so many incredible comedians, including some of my personal favorites like Bob and David from Mr. Show. But nothing could beat all of the amazing Al appearances. So pretty much starting off the show, Al shows up in a sketch by The State. Now, The State, of course, is the sketch comedy troupe from MTV back in the 90s. Now, maybe some people didn't understand the sketch because there was a lot of references back to their old TV show, but as someone who does love The State, it was pretty stinking majestic. It was really funny. Al shows up. There's other surprise guests. Of course, you know, his good buddy Thomas Lennon is also a member of The State, so he's in there as well. Now, both of our former guests who were appearing on Festpocalypse were pitted against other comedians in their segment. I'm happy to report that episode 21-inch guest Dave Hill won his debate of cats versus dogs against Margaret Cho. And I'm also happy to report that episode 15-inch and episode 40-inch guest Jonah Ray won on the mini Doug Benson Doug Loves Movies segment. Now, I have to say, the absolute best part of Festpocalypse was the last bit. And not just because I'm a big Weird Al fan, it was truly the funniest bit of the entire event. So it featured Triumph the Insult Comic Dog interviewing Weird Al, and it was so funny. So Triumph kept singing these songs that he said were Weird Al songs, and of course they weren't, but they were hilarious. And Weird Al even joined him in singing one of these imaginary Weird Al parodies. You have to check it out if you haven't seen it. Now, another really cool thing was they had this digital after party where it was essentially like a video game and you can walk around and video chat with people, and they also had all these little Easter eggs all over the place. And so that was really cool to check out. But one of the Easter eggs was an unaired clip of Al and Triumph. So much great Al content. It was a blast.
Wow, that sounds great. Anyone who missed out on the fun can still buy a ticket and catch the Festpocalypse replay over at sssketchfest.com. And it's like 3 hours long, so if you're hungry, feel free to head on over to vegan Mexican restaurant Burrito Burrito in Troy, New York, and pick up a snack. This week's episode is brought to you in part by vegan Mexican restaurant Burrito Burrito in Troy, New York, home of the 2-pound double wrapped in a quesadilla Burrito Burrito. Come on down to Burrito Burrito and Burrito Burrito, your Burrito Burrito. Find them at burritosquared.com and at Burrito Squared on Instagram. And remember, not every burrito is a burrito burrito burrito, but every burrito 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 can be burrito burritoed.
Now that we've covered the news, I think it's time we check another interview off our Placebo EP checklist.
Our next guest has performed with Neil Diamond for 17 years and Mark Knopfler since 1994. The list of people that he has recorded with and worked with just scrolls on for pages. Everyone from Billy Joel, Barbra Streisand, Emmylou Harris, and of course, Weird Al Yankovic. And he is also the brother of our favorite drummer. It is our great pleasure to welcome to the podcast, Richard Bennett. How's it going, Richard?
Everything's going fine. We're staying safe in, reasonable lockdown mode and have been since March. And that suits us just fine, to be honest with you. It gives us license to be the introverts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, now we don't look weird. We're just
I know. And the thing is, I do miss my friends, but I don't know how much of the old normal I'm going back to anyway when this is all said and done and in our rearview mirror. I just don't give a damn about any of that anymore.
I hear you.
Become a hermit crab, I suppose.
I always say some of the biggest changes is that not much changed out of my introvert life, Staying home? All right, yeah, I don't mind.
I mean, it's a world nightmare.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But our expenses have dropped by like half to 2/3. Our Visa bill, I look forward to it coming in now. To see how much money we've saved. Yeah, it's going to change a lot of things, and so many people have died and so many people have suffered. And but I think there'll be a slightly new order come out of this, not all in a negative way at the end of it. But I'm certainly rooting for a post-vaccine world.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think where we need to start is absolutely with how you are the brother of John Bermuda Schwartz. How long has that been?
He's almost. Well, let's see. How old is he? He's 64. I guess almost 64 years now. Yeah, you have to ask our parents about that. But yeah, he's my kid brother and a great musician, and I'm proud of him. Always have been.
And growing up, it was just the two of you with your parents, and you come from a very musical family. What can you tell us about, music growing up?
Well, both of our parents were involved. My mother, as a teenager and a young adult, sang light opera
Wow.
on the radio and in Chicago and that kind of thing. And I think she had probably wanted a career of that, but that didn't work out that way. My father, our father, well, played accordion. Again, not, but he was pretty good at it. And he was also in advertising and in radio in the 40s, and then later in the 50s in television. So, there was some sort of a musical and an entertainment background there. And there was always music around the house, as I recall, either just the radio being on or, my folks playing records.
Yeah.
All kinds of different music, and of course having about 5 years jump start on John, I grew up listening to, or remember first hearing, kind of pre-rock and roll pop music, Frankie Lane and Joe Stafford and Joni James and Rosemary Clooney and people like that, Perry Como and stuff like that. So that's what my folks listened to, and so yeah, music was always around. My folks used to listen to a lot of Cuban music and Latin music. My uncle had moved at some point in the mid-50s, I think, to Cuba, kind of pre-Castro Cuba, and he was sort of a wonderful ne'er-do-well who tended the bar and womanized and gave tours to tourists in Cuba. And it all, I think, went to fund his golf playing habit. And, once or twice a year, he'd come back to Chicago, where we were still living, to visit, to visit our folks, because I think the rest of the family was gone at that point. My other uncle had died, and my grandparents on my dad's side had died. So I remember him coming to Chicago to visit us, looking very tan and smelling of whatever bay rum he had on him, and an armload of the latest Cuban records, 78s, and teaching my parents the latest Cuban dances. That would have been just around the time John was born, and just slightly thereafter. Mm-hmm. And of course, when Castro came in, he fled back to Phoenix, where we were living then in 1960 or 61, I think that was. So yeah, all kinds of music was around the house.
Obviously, yeah, music all around the house. What was your first instrument? What did you kind of pick up, when you first started in music?
Well, my first instrument was drums.
Wow.
And
Okay.
yeah, I know. And my dad, being in advertising, had done some work for the William Ludwig Company, which was based in Chicago then.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it still may be, I don't know, but it was then and had always been up to that point. And I think he was always sort of a frustrated drummer himself. And in lieu of payment for his work, he worked out a deal with them that to get a little small drum kit. And I remember going with him to the Ludwig factory there to pick it up and meeting the old man, meeting William Ludwig, not Junior, but the old man.
Wow.
And so that was it. It was deemed that I was going to play drums, and I took lessons at the William Knapp School of Percussion, I think it was called, in Chicago, which was a very famous place and turned out a lot of professional drummers, not the least of which was Hal Blaine and Buddy Harmon, but also it had turned out drummers for years and percussionists. And it was just something I did, I don't think I had a real passion for the drums, but, what 6-year-old or 7-year-old kid didn't like beating on drums? So that's what I did. But around that time, rock and roll was starting to come in, and I was always really interested in country music and hillbilly music and stuff. And, you'd see guys like Ernest Tubb and, I don't know, Hank Snow or Elvis on TV, and they always had a guitar slung around their neck. So that's really that really caught my attention more than the drums. And I, persevered with drums for about 4 years, but that wasn't my real passion. My passion was guitar. And, I guess when I was 11 or 12, I got a guitar. And at that point, the drums went by the wayside. And John got the drums, and it turned out that was his passion.
Yeah.
So things work out the way they're supposed to,
Oh, so his first drum set was your first drum set as well, right?
Yeah. They just moved over from my bedroom into his.
I'm sure your parents were thrilled.
Yeah. And, I started trying to get from a C chord to an F chord without inflicting collateral damage on the guitar, But that's how that all ended up.
Now, was there ever any jealousy between John trying to, say, well, I already got Richard's drum set. I wonder if I can get his guitar next.
No, I don't think so. I think he found his musical instrument pretty quickly, and to his credit, he stayed with that. And has done incredibly well, with it all. And I guess I found my way as well,
And when you did pass on the drums, did you spend any time showing John around?
No, I don't recall that. But he might have some insider memory of that. I don't. At that point in our siblinghood, we were kind of at war with each other a lot of the time. I don't think I showed him anything, but he did. He did great with that, and like I said, I've always been really proud of him.
Now, outside of the couple demos and studio recordings you did with Weird Al and John, were you ever in any bands with John as a kid or since then?
Yeah, not really. No. There was just enough of that age gap, that 5-year gap, that by the time he really started, being interested in playing in bands and stuff, I was kind of off already doing session work and playing with Neil Diamond and all of that. And so I was busy, with my career at that point. Now, we did we did do some recording together, one of which is the thing that led to ultimately meeting Al. But we did a couple of things together, just home recordings, but they were good recordings of things that John sent into the Dr. Demento show that Barry, Dr. Demento, played and played fairly regularly for a while. And so we did things like that, and we did some outside shows together. And, a few things we did, but I was sort of focused at that time on, my studio work had begun to take off, as well as the Neil Diamond thing sort of coinciding with it. And so I was kind of busy,
So after recording, a handful of things with John and, them getting submitted and played on Dr. Demento, at what point did you learn about, this new bandmate of his, Alfred Yankovic?
Well, I think I first got onto Al through the Dr. Demento show. I mean, I was just a fan of the show, and I listened nearly every Sunday as often as I could. And it seems that I heard My Sharona first on the Demento show, whenever that was, 78 or something, And I also remember I used to haunt the Big Tower record shop on Sunset. I'd go in there 2 or 3 times, not a week, but certainly a month.
Yeah.
And drop obscene amounts of money on records there. And I remember, going up to the counter one night to check out with an armload of records, and there was a box of Al's My Sharona 45s on Capitol.
Yeah.
So I just kind of put that on the stack too. So that was, that was my introduction to Al.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a fan, from the start. And, that's how that happened.
And so were you listening to that Dr. Demento show in 1980 when John actually joins Al and bangs on the accordion case?
Yeah, well, we were there. I was there.
Oh, you were?
With him. Yeah, because being a big fan of Barry's, I had a close friend who we'd done a lot of sessions together at that point, and he'd also joined Neil Diamond's band, a guy named Tom Hensley. And Tom knew Barry. And, I got together with Tom and said, man, let's see if we can get Demento together and round him up and go have dinner together, just the 3 of us, which we did. And, Tom, Barry, and myself. And then we ended up back at my house listening to 78s that night. So I kind of had a little bit of a, introduction to Dr. Demento there.
Right.
And I asked him if it would be all right if my brother and I, John and I, came up and watched him do his show one night, which he was perfectly fine with. And then I went on to explain that John had done a couple of recordings that he'd been playing for a while. The Ballad of Woodsy Owl we did, and I think we did a version of Pico and Sepulveda. And so he was all for that. And so anyway, we arrived at the night that we could all do it. And at that point, Barry used to do his show live. I think it was on KMET there in Hollywood at the time. And it went from 6 to 10, 4 hours of live radio. And so that was it. John and I turned up there at the station and were welcomed in. And Barry always used to have, a handful of college, I don't want to call them kids, but they were college kids,
Yeah.
come in, and they were all into music and stuff. And it created a good vibe, it created a party atmosphere there. And they'd help out, answering requests and taking phone calls and making noise, and it was all a lot of fun. And, I think heading into the fourth hour, Al asked if anybody, he had a new song he wanted to debut, a parody of Another One Rides the Bus, and asked if everybody to come into the studio there with him, into a little side studio, and, just make noise and create a party atmosphere and bang on. Of course, John said, well, I play drums, and so Al said, oh, great, here, pound on my accordion case. That was that, and they recorded it. Of course, it went out live, but they also recorded it, and that ended up being the single that was released on TK Records. So yeah, we John and I were both there that night that happened, and we both met Al that night. Of course, I think we both knew who he was, because he used to, apart from the My Sharona thing, he was sort of a semi-regular there on the Demento show.
Right.
Answering phones and that kind of thing.
How crazy is it that because of that one day, we're all sitting here today talking to each other?
I know.
Crazy to think about, right?
It's pretty interesting how stuff happens. And of course, that John and Al have been together since that night.
Yeah.
John's been involved in everything. I remember, I don't know, when Al finally put a band together, and John told me that. I didn't, well, maybe I did say it out loud, but if I didn't, I certainly thought, well, that's great. If you can get a couple of years out of that, boy, you've done well. That's not to put Al down in any way whatsoever. I just didn't see it as involved or as long-lasting as it's turned out to be.
Right.
But I can't think of any other musician that I know who's had a gig that long.
Right. And that consistently. And
right, hell yeah.
Same band, and yeah, it's incredible.
It's really incredible. It's really incredible. My hat's off to John, but my hat's off to Al too for being very loyal, and knowing that, when something's good and in place, there's no reason to stir it up.
Right.
You just keep going.
Now, so you were at the recording of Another One Rides the Bus. Were you making any noise in the background? Is there any?
No, I think I was the only fool who declined to be part of it. But I remember all of them going off to a little anti-studio, just a little side studio from the one that he was in, and them all huddling off in there and doing it, and me and Barry sitting out in the main control room, watching it go on. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, they all did fine without me. I thought it was, what I really loved about it was that back in the 40s and 50s, it wasn't uncommon to record a record in a radio studio, as opposed to a standalone recording studio. A lot of records were made up in recording studios. And so there you go, whenever that was, 1980, it happened again,
The success of Another One Rides the Bus, of course, then Al decided to put out his own EP of that. And there were a couple songs he put out on that EP, one of them, Happy Birthday, which I understand you were also involved in that one as well.
Yeah, I was involved in that, and a few other things. I'll Be Mellow When I'm Dead, I played on.
Yeah.
As part of that EP. And we recorded that. We ended up recording that up in my garage. I was living up in Lake Hollywood, just up above Burbank at the time. And the house we were living in, the house we bought, the people who had it before had converted a street-level 2-car garage. They kind of blocked it off and made it into into a room. So that ended up being my music room in that garage. And anyway, that's where we recorded it. And Al had a 4-track Porta studio, they called that.
Yes.
4-track cassette recorder. And that was it. You know, it was really archaic and on cassette at that. Whatever speed that went at, I think 3 3/4 or something. It was just nothing. And if you were clever, you could sort of bounce from one track to another. So you could record 3 tracks and keep one track open and bounce 2 or 3 of those tracks onto the one track and just keep ping-ponging like that.
Oh, okay.
Which is what we did. And which was not an uncommon thing prior to like 16-track or even 8-track. You know, with 4 tracks, and a lot of Beatles records and records of that era were done that way. You know, you record 3 tracks and bounce them, and then record, 2 more and bounce it, and, back and forth and back and forth. And of course, each time you did the bounce, it would degrade the track before it just ever so slightly. But it also gave it a really kind of wonderful atmosphere as well. So anyway, that's what was going on with that EP that ended up on Placebo. And I have to tell you, I went, Discogs.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a record collecting clearinghouse kind of thing.
Right.
I went there today, and for the first time, and looked that EP up, and my God, it's, I think there's 3 copies available, beginning at $399. Holy Christmas,
It's an expensive one, yeah.
But there you go. Yeah, so we did that up in my garage, and I played on those 2 things, and then John and Al and the rest of them kind of did whatever else was on it. There were a couple of other things. Something Mr. Trump and the Iron Lung is on there.
Yeah.
I think it's called that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Trump and the Iron Lung. I don't remember if I played on that, but I think that was done up in the garage as well.
Oh, cool.
And then we re-recorded some of that stuff at Westwood One shortly after. Westwood One was a radio syndication house that had a studio and its offices in Culver City, I believe it was. And I think we re-recorded I'll Be Mellow When I'm Dead there. And I'm not sure what the purpose of that was. If that was the one that ended up on the Placebo version or not, John would know that. And we also recorded Stop Dragging My Car Around and The Checks in the Mail. That was all done at Westwood One. And then, not too long after that, Al got a record deal.
Right.
In the meantime, I think the EP had come out, and then Al got a Scotty Brothers. I think it was at Scotty Brothers or something.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And what's his name from the McCoys? I can't think of his name.
Yeah, Rick Derringer. Yep.
Yeah, Rick produced that album, and I played. Then we re-recorded again, The Checks in the Mail, and I'll be mellow when I'm dead, in a proper studio that Rick looked after.
Right.
And then that was it. My services were no longer needed. between Rick being a great guitar player and Jim West being a great guitar player, Al had his guitar players in place.
Right.
Right. Now, were you with Neil Diamond at that time?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, yeah. So you had something to fall back on there.
Yeah. Well, and my studio work, had really taken off by then.
Okay, yeah.
I was busy,
Yeah. Back when you were recording a few of those things for Al's EP and the first album. How were you first approached to record on those? Was that through John or was that through Al?
I forgot exactly. I think it was more a case of me having a space, a little place to do it in. And I think it must have been John who organized it. But it was all very casual.
Yeah.
And, it must have been John who organized it because, after initially meeting Al there at Dr. Demento's program, I think the next time we got together would have been up in my garage. So John would have put that together.
Okay.
But, whenever you all have a word with him next, he's got like a mind like a steel trap for all of that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
He's really into documentation and the history of it all. And I am to some degree, but, God, that was a long time ago,
Yeah.
Was John always like that as a kid too? Was his room always nice and neat and everything and organized, and he had his homework in on time and things like that as well?
Well, I don't know. He always was very conscientious about things. I can't vouch for his homework and stuff, but when it came to musical things and all of that, and things like his record collection and stuff, I always remember him being very organized and conscientious.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the go-to guy for anything Al.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he doesn't remember it, it didn't happen. As far as I'm concerned.
I know. Like I mentioned, he sent me a little refresher of these things that I played on for Al and when it was and where it was, and the dates and all of that. At best, I would have had I was keeping a date book at that point, so I would have had them in my date book, but man, he's just got it all documented.
Yeah.
He's terrific. And, the Westwood One stuff, I don't know how much stuff you've covered with him, but that little interim recordings we did there at Westwood One, Al was working at Westwood One at the time. And I think when Al decided to leave, John ended up with Al's job there. And that was kind of a day job for both of them. And John, I don't know what Al was doing there specifically, but John ended up being the facilities manager at Westwood One for quite a long time, well into the time that Al was touring. And Westwood One was really good about letting him go do that. And Al had a sub that would go take on his work there at Westwood One when he was away. So it worked out to be a good deal. He could keep his day job kind of thing and still go out on tour and do whatever recording with Al and other people as well. So it worked out to be really good. And then at some point, he was ready to leave Westwood.
Right. Wow. I'm curious on the Placebo EP, of course, the one that's $400 on Discogs. You are credited as Bopcat Bennett. What was the origin of that name, Bopcat?
Yep.
All right. We'll pick up the interview here next week on episode 93-inch, where we dive into more of Richard's incredible music career.
Thank you once again, Richard. I am so looking forward to the conclusion of this interview next week. And a big thank you to Bermuda for hooking us up with Bopcat. I don't know how Bermuda was able to get Bopcat's contact information, but we're so glad that he did.
This week's episode is brought to you in part by Discover Darwin, promoting tourism in Darwin, Minnesota. Not only is historic Darwin, Minnesota beautiful, it's also shabby.
Now, Ethan, that's not nice. They are our sponsor.
Shabby, as in the Shabby Shed, the premier home goods store in Darwin, Minnesota.
Wait, didn't that close 3 years ago?
Yes, but when it was open, it was the premier home goods store in Darwin, Minnesota.
Wow, Darwin had everything.
And to prove how premier they were, they even got a 5-star review on Google. once.
That's 5 out of 5 stars.
That's right. And back in the day, they were the stop to get your home goods like
Handmade signs.
home goods,
Refinished furniture.
home goods,
Home goods.
home goods.
And now, it's just a vacant lot. So visit Darwin, Minnesota on your next expedition. Discover Darwin, more than just a twine ball. And after you visit Darwin, Minnesota, be sure to visit discoverdarwin.biz.
Hey Dave, do you like free stuff?
Oh boy, do I love free stuff.
Well, you are in luck because each and every week we're able to bring you this podcast absolutely free thanks to sponsors like Burrito, Angel Valenzuela and his son David Cash, Discover Darwin, Jackson Scoggins, and our amazing close personal friend Patreon supporters Kenneth, Jared, Zeb, Blair, Allison, and Javier, as well as Richard and so many more.
Revenue from our incredible supporters on patreon.com/2000inch allows us to continue doing what we love, which is making fantastically fun and family-friendly Weird Al podcasts for you each and every week. We'd absolutely appreciate your consideration in joining our pretty stinking majestic Patreon family for as little as $1 per month.
Looking for another way to support the podcast? Head over to shop.2000inch.com for official Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast t-shirts, tote bags, tank tops, face masks, mugs, pillows, and so much more.
Find us online at WeirdOutPodcast.com or 2000inch.com, where you can find information about our guests and listen to past episodes like episode 32-inch with Frank from the Bank Sanchez,
episode 52-inch and episode 82-inch with Dr. Demento,
episode 72-inch with Beefalo Bill Burke,
episode 10-inch, episode 16-inch, episode 27-inch, episode 67-inch, episode 68-inch, episode 82-inch, and episode 83-inch with John Bermuda Schwartz.
This episode 92-inch with Richard Bennett.
And for all you time travelers, future episodes 93-inch, 100-inch, and of course, episode 2000-inch.
Please join our Facebook group by heading to group.2000inch.com for episode discussions and other exclusive content. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at 2000inch and at youtube.2000inch.com. Be sure to share our posts and tell your friends to Gill and chill.
We love it when you leave us voicemail via our 27-hour-a-day podcast hotline 347 Spatula. You might even hear your message on the air. You can catch our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or the podcast app of your choice. Whichever you choose, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you do not miss any episodes, especially the new episodes that drop every Wednesday.
We will soon begin airing our series of bonus episodes where we sit down with John Bermuda Schwartz and go page by page, picture by picture, inch by inch through his book, Black and White and Weird All Over. Time is running out for you to grab a book if you want to be able to follow along with those episodes. Plus, it's a great gift to give someone for Black History Month.
Thank you once again to Richard Bopcat Bennett, John Bermuda Schwartz, Susan McNabb, Eric Rhodes, Jim Kimo West for our incredible theme song, and thanks to all of our listeners, subscribers, Patreon supporters, and sponsors, and everyone else who made this podcast and episode possible.
Make sure you tune in next week, episode 93-inch, for the exciting conclusion of our interview with Richard Bopcat Bennett.
That was Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, episode 92-inch.
Proudly spotlighting Jerry Seinfeld's ex-girlfriend's current dog.
Now, were you with Neil Diamond at that time?
Yeah, I was.
So you had something to fall back on there.